And our commandment is to remember just that we received everything for free. When I was in Europe, I keep coming across Christians that discover their Jewish roots, which is great. I'm very happy about that, because the separation from the Jewish roots, actually, if you cut a tree from its roots, it would die, it would dwindle, and we have seen the church dying. So discovering the Jewish roots is very good, but it creates some confusion, because I've seen people confuse Judaism with rabbinical Judaism. And it is not. You have to understand that 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was here, Judaism also took a turn away from the Messiah, and rabbinical Judaism started. And the authority that was established was the authority of the rabbis. The Talmud actually declares that the rabbis have more authority than God. In Baba Metzia 59, page 2. So when Christians discover the Jewish roots, many of them do the first thing and go to rabbinical Judaism, and they make a mistake here. And one of the things they start doing, which is actually, again, very great, they start celebrating the Jewish feast, the Shabbat, for example. They take the Shabbat. And I think the Shabbat is one of the themes that is the most confusing, most misunderstood in scriptures. Many people look at it as a day that they have to keep, and or don't do this or don't do that, or do this or do that, and in the end they're actually doing the opposite of what Shabbat really means. So what I'd like us to do is I'd like us to go through the scriptures and try to understand what God is trying to tell us or to do for us in the Shabbat. And we'll go first to the very beginning. The very beginning is Genesis chapter 2, where God creates men. And in chapter 2, verse 1 until 3, this is, we read every Friday evening when we have our Shabbat meal. ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם, ויחל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה, ויברך אלוהים את היום השביעי ויקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. Now, God creates the world in 6 days. And then he creates Shabbat, and he says he rested on the Shabbat. Now, did God actually need rest? It says God does not get tired. God never sleeps or slumber. God doesn't need to recuperate. God does not need rest. So why did he create the Shabbat? Did he create it for himself? Man was created on the afternoon, or towards, it was the last of the creation. It was on the afternoon of Friday, of the 6th day. So actually, the first day of man on earth was a Shabbat. See, Shabbat was created for man. That's what Jesus says as well. Shabbat was created for man. But that is very interesting. Why did God create the Shabbat? And it created it as the first day of man. See, God, it says here that God finished all the work. There was nothing left to do. He created all things. He worked all things. He did all things. And then he creates man and he gives it to him without men needing to earn anything. The first thing that men had to learn, that Adam and Eve had to learn, was to rest. The first thing that they had to do was to accept things that they didn't earn. And that is, we know that is really difficult for us. We like to earn things. We like to say, no, I deserve it. I earned it. That's my, something I did for it and I got it back. God wanted to teach men, God wanted to teach humanity that everything that he has done is free, is a gift, and men cannot earn it. Men cannot do nothing in order to receive it. That was the first lesson that men had to learn. Before he could work, he started to work on the Sunday, but first he had to just accept without earning anything, without the work. Now, it says God sanctified the rest. He set it apart. He made it special because it there is a very special principle that God was trying to give to humanity, to give to men. When we move on, actually, the Jewish tradition, when it speaks about the history of the world, it says in Psalm that the day of the Lord is like 1,000 years. And the Jewish tradition divided the world history into days. It says there were like 1,000 years. There were 2,000 years or 2 days without the law, 2 days of the Torah, 2 days of Messiah, and then Shabbat. Now today we are either in the beginning of the 7,000 or the end of the 6,000, depends on how you count it. So even according to the Jewish tradition, Messiah was supposed to have come 2,000 years ago. And they, of course, they asked the question, how come he didn't come? And they answered, well, because we were sinners. They said if we would be little sinners, he would come in the beginning. If it would be middle sinners, he would come in the middle of the 2 days of the 2,000. If it would be much sinners, he would come towards the end. Well, the point is that now they say, well, if only Israel would keep Shabbat twice, altogether, all Israel, Messiah would come. Again, depends on the works. But we learn Shabbat will not come because of works, right? Men entered into the Shabbat out of God's goodness, out of God's grace, out of the fact that God did everything. And Messiah actually came because of our sins, and he did come 2,000 years ago. But it's not just the Jewish tradition that teaches that Shabbat would come, that the rest would come. Also in Christianity, we speak about the millennium, the 1,000 years of peace at the end of time, where there would be rest. God would come and reign with his people, and there would be rest to the creation, to nature. So the whole concept of Shabbat is there to make us look backwards, to remember the things, to make us look into the future, to see what's coming, and of course, to see what God is doing. Now, in the Ten Commandments, the commandment about the Shabbat takes the most space, the most verses. And you'd think, well, murdering is really important, fornication is really important, but the command to keep the Shabbat takes the most space, which means for God, this is really important. And the whole question is really, what is keeping the Shabbat? And that's what we're trying to see, because keeping the Shabbat the way it is done today is not keeping the Shabbat, is working the opposite of what the Shabbat is. So let's look at what it actually says in the Ten Commandments. The first one appears in Exodus 20, verse 7 to 10. And I'm going to read it. Actually, I have it here printed out, so I'll read it out from here. Again, I'll read it in Hebrew, but read it for yourself. Okay? Chapter 20, Exodus, verses 7 to 10. זכור את יום השבת לקודשו. 6 ימים תעבוד ועשית כל מלאכתך, וביום השביעי שבת לאדוני אלוהיך. לא תעשה כל מלאכה אתה ובנך ובתך, עבדך ואמתך ובהמתך וגרך אשר בשעריך, כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, את הים ואת כל אשר בם, וינח ביום השביעי. על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו. It says here that God, tells us to remember the Shabbat day, to remember because God has created the world on 7 days, in 6 days, and he rested on the 7th day. He finished everything. He completed everything. There's nothing left undone. There's nothing left to do. He set it apart. And our commandment is to remember just that we received everything for free.